the question that I had in mind is, I know that you're an expert on tariffs, and one of the aspects we spoke about was the United States relationship to China and how tariffs were a key policy of Trump's 8 to 4 years ago. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts in this area.
Yes, the Trump tariff policy is the opposite of the 19th century American tariff policy. The idea of protective tariffs in the 19th century was if you raise the price of imported goods, you will create a price umbrella that will enable American companies to make capital investments and earn the profits to be able to make an investment to become independent from reliance on England and other Western European countries. So protective tariffs meant, they called it sometimes infant industry. It was to develop industry. Today's the tariffs that Trump is proposing, and I'm sure that any Democratic administration would continue, of 20% on China products, are not going to promote any infant or developed industry in the United States, because for the reasons we've described, America's already made itself uncompetitive by privatizing what should be a social public utility, by privatizing finance, by privatizing healthcare, by privatizing the cost of education. Imagine if Americans have to pay $40,000 to $50,000 a year in debt, to be sure, to get a college degree, to get a job. If they have to go into debt to buy a car to drive to the job, if they have to pay for 18% of GDP on healthcare, then for healthcare alone, other countries can provide the entire wage for just what Americans have to pay for healthcare. There's no way that you can nurture a new industry in the United States. So if the tariffs are not going to protect an industry and develop a means of becoming independent, what are they going to do? Tariffs, in a way, are the opposite of sanctions. It's as if another country has sanctioned our country and we have to develop our own industry. When America sanctions Russia, that's the equivalent of Russia putting an infinitely high tariff on its industry, and the sanctions are nurturing Russian infant industry and infant agriculture and infant all sorts of things. It's developed their independence. But in the United States, all the tariffs can do are two things. One, it'll raise the price for imports from China, which means Walmart's prices are going to go way, way up. But also the tariffs are going to create revenue for the United States. And one of the advantages of tariffs for the William Seward, who was Lincoln's foreign secretary, basically said, well, when you raise tariffs, that provides enough income that you don't have to tax industry. In this case, it'll finance government spending, and the tariffs will finance our spending to build the Erie Canal infrastructure. And Seward's economist, Erasmus Pershing Smith, whom I wrote my dissertation on, developed this, the general idea of tariffs, and it worked for the United States. Now, if the United States gets this revenue from China and says, we know that your profit rates are not all that high, but the money, whatever you export to us, we're going to take that 20%, and that's going to be how we finance our military expenditure around you, so that we can carve you up into other countries when we begin to destroy you, because you're our number one enemy. That essentially, we're almost word for word what Tariff has been saying. They're our enemy. Biden says they're our number one enemy. We want them to pay our costs, our expenses of financing our military surrounding of them, and tariffs are how we're going to do it. It's going to raise money for the Treasury. Well, China has a number of responses they're going to be. And I should have said one of the factors that have led to the American decline in the world is it has a policy. It never expects any other country to respond to it. It thinks of we're the actors and every other country's passive. They're not going to do anything except they'll have to follow whatever we do, and that's the law for them. That's a rules-based order is we make the rules, you follow them. Whatever we do to you, you'll have to accept. Well, what if China then says, well, okay, we're going to raise our own export tax by 20%, so that our government should get 20%. Well, that's going to increase the export price, and now your tariff is going to be the equivalent of 30%. Well, by that point, you're going to get a 50% increase in the price of almost everything we get from China. And China's already said, well, if you're going to have tariffs against our exports, then we can't earn enough money to buy things from you. So we don't have to export for much for you, since you don't need the money to buy from us. So we're going to stop exporting to you germanium, gallium, the rare earths. We're not going to export cadmium to you. We're aluminum. We're doing most of the aluminum refining. We don't have to export that. Now that we want to keep the trade balance between us, and if you don't buy from us, we'll just scale everything back. It said the same thing to Europe. America told Europe, you have to sanction China because if you trade with a country, you're dependent on it, and break your dependence on China by not exporting to it. And so China has now cut back its exports to Europe, saying, look, you're complaining, Europe, that trade is unbalanced between us. Well, there are plenty of things we'd like to buy from you. There's a Dutch company that makes ultraviolet engraving machinery for what we need for computer chips. Won't you sell us this machinery? We're glad to buy from you. The Americans say, no, don't export anything to China that it needs for potentially military uses. So China said, well, if you won't sell to us, what's our point? Why do we need to sell? Why do we need euros for? There's no need for that. So we don't need any euros to buy from you. So, we'll just cut back. So the sanctions that are being imposed by the Trump administration and the Biden administration together are isolating the United States from these countries. And so it's not simply a question of pricing American labor out of the market. There are essential raw materials. America's getting its enriched uranium from Russia for all of this. It was getting what it needs for the outer space, not missiles, but spaceships from Russia. Well, and especially the explosion chambers where all the flames come out of. Well, that was made, I think, in Ukraine and in Western Russia. Well, it's not. They've cut that out. So you're going to have a break in the supply chain. Well, a break in the supply chain, like imagine if Boeing can't get certain parts for its airplanes, it has to stop making the whole airplane. Well, the war with China, a combination of sanctions against trade with China, and the tariffs are going to lead China to cut back its exports of starting with key inputs that American industry and especially the American military need. China will say, well, okay, you think the new rules-based order of trade is you don't give another country any exports that will help it make war on you. Okay, you're saying that's for us. We'll go along with that. We're not going to export to you things that are going to help. Well, already the United States, for instance, has said going to Intel that makes computer chips and say, we don't want you to export the fast computer chips to China because they may put it in a missile and they may aim the missile at us and blow us up. So Intel has been blocked from making exports to China. Well, the result is Intel is now going broke. It said, well, wait a minute, China was our major market. Without China, we're not a profitable company anymore. It's now put itself up for sale. It says we can't make profits without selling to China. That was our market. Well, so America foreign policy from both Trump and the Republicans and the Democrats, not just Trump and Biden. It's the whole Congress is so adversarial, treating the whole rest of the world as an enemy, that it is pursuing a policy that not only is pricing America out of the market, that is increasing the cost of consumer goods that we'll have to that people buy to keep the cost of living down. The American inflation will go way up. That means that the real wages are going to go down. That means more pressure for rising wages. But most of all, it means that the aircraft industry, the military industry, the computer industry, the artificial intelligence industry, all of these are going to have supply chains interruptions, and the whole process is going to come to a close. Russia won't sell us the improved uranium to make the bombs or the electric, the nuclear power utilities work. You're going to all of a sudden, it's as if they're bombing our economy, but the bombs are a legal bomb imposed by the Republicans and Democrats in Congress, saying, we want to be separate from them, but it won't be separate and equal. We're no longer going to get what we need from them, and so we're going to be an economy that doesn't get what we need to continue to industrialize, and there goes American prosperity. Companies are going to close down. Intel has scaled back its employment, saying, well, we don't need to employ your workers anymore because we're not allowed to export your products to China, and that's the growing market, because there's not much market in America because we've moved all the production to Asia, and the Asians would simply buy from us and sell it to China. So essentially, America's cutting its own throat in terms of foreign trade because of the tariff. And that, of course, was Trump's lead policy. He said, I'm leading my whole policy with a 20% tariff to punish Russia. That's going to hurt him. He also talks about he said, I'll end the war in Russia within 1 week. Well, there's only one way to end the in Ukraine. We'll end the war in one week. There's only one way to do that: to hydrogen bomb Russia with 20 hydrogen bombs. If you don't do that, you don't end the war in 1 week. Is that what Trump is saying, or is he just ignorant? Well, his first Secretary of State said he's really a moron, and I'm resigning, going back to Standard Oil. The politicians don't have any idea of economics because they've never taken an economic course in, I won't say Marxism, in classical economics. Nobody who's in a position of analyzing America's strengths and weaknesses understands what's happening. The situation in American economic policy is the same in military policy. The military analysts who have talked about how Russia is winning the war in Ukraine and Israel is sort of ending itself by its the policies that what it's doing to the Palestinians and now to the Lebanese. They've been forced out of the CAA. People like McGovern and Colonel, go right down the line for all of the military analysts who've had to leave the military, leave the State Department, leave the Department of Homeland Security, because they didn't agree with the neocon directions. They're saying, look, your neocon direction is not going to work. Well, that's not the way you get promoted in the State Department or any of the in the military or the CAA. And you're not promoted. You end up leaving, and you go on the talk shows. And for people who leave, and there are a couple of talk shows on the internet that feature them, that are they're called the realists, and the neocons don't like the realists because they pander to American politics that's not based on a realistic worldview, but on sort of the fantasy of us versus them, and we can beat them, even as we deindustrialize our country, even if we create a class war here, lowering real wages while siphoning off all of the income to the wealthiest 1% that own the bondholders, basically, the people who, the financial managers of corporations, the stockholders, not the people, not the employees. Well, without a realistic economic policy or a realistic military policy, how are you going to have a strategy that works with the rest of the world, except to say, if you don't do what we want, we'll bomb you. We'll have our foreign legion. We'll set ISIS and Al-Qaeda on you if you're in the Middle East. We'll set the Nazis on you. If you're in Russia or Europe, we have Nazi groups all over there that we can promote. If you're in Africa, we'll have again, ISIS is there. Our foreign legions are there. The Israelis also have a whole contingent fighting in Ukraine alongside the Nazis against the Russians, because the common denominator is they both hate Russians for different reasons. The Nazis, the Israelis hate Russians because of their anti-Semitism that they had in the 19th century under Tsarism, and the Nazis fight Russians because they weren't anti-Semitic. It's very it's ironic. So the election is going to be continued to go down the unrealistic path that it's going down now, and it will follow economic and trade policies that are not only going to raise the consumer price index for the consumer goods that we import from China and other countries, but it'll lead to a mutual trade. The trade war will not be like it was in the 1930s, raising tariffs against each other. It's just not trading at all. You're not competing for markets. We're withdrawing from markets. And that's what America's done. A trade war, you're supposed to win markets from other countries in one way or another. Today's trade war is that we're going to cut off market to you, you'll cut off market to us, and we're just ending up with America being isolated without any analysis. Is, well, wait a minute, if we don't get the raw materials, the energy, the industrial products, the food from the global majority, how are we going to start again as if we're back in the 19th century? The economy will be wrecked. So you could say that both parties agree that it's desirable to wreck the American economy. And there's a reason for that. You make more money from an economy that's being wrecked than you do from an economy that's thriving. You make it quicker because companies who go bankrupt, the financial sector, the corporate raiders can pick them up for a song, and then once they pick them up for a song, they can then say, all right, we're going to go back to a reasonable world, and now all the companies that we've taken over for a song, now they'll be profitable again. But the problem is that America's creating irreversibilities, and the irreversibility is the emergence of BRICS, saying we don't need America or Europe. We can now depend on ourselves for mutual gain and mutual trade. So there's no way to reverse the irreversible. And the financial plan of bankrupting companies, picking them up at distress sale prices, it will be that this doesn't pull the economy out of distress. You'll have a distressed economy where companies are going bankrupt. They cut back employment. The workers will not be able to pay their rents. They won't be able to pay their credit card fees, their mortgage payments, their auto loans. You're already finding, as we've talked before, loans going into arrears. You already have a 40% office vacancy rate here in New York City. What are we going to do with these vacant offices? Well, they're talking about maybe we can rent it out as luxury property. Well, the problem is that these offices aren't very good for residential property, where are you going to do your grocery shopping? If you live in a nice Wall Street building. And what are you going to do for air conditioning? And what are you going to do for light? There are going to be a lot of rooms that don't have any light in them. What are you going to do for these? So the Financial Times on Friday just had a similar discussion about their financial city that the Reichmans developed 30 or 40 years ago. The financial buildings that had banks, now that England has taken itself out of the Eurozone, are largely vacant. And maybe we can rent them out. There's a housing shortage in London. Look at all the advantages of the financial area there. There were government spent a lot of money with the Jubilee line making extensions. You can get to it easily. But again, it's a desert. Doesn't feel like a neighborhood. There are no stores the buildings are not designed to have stores on the ground floor like you work down Queens Boulevard. There are coffee shops, there are grocery stores, there are shoe stores. How are you going to make buildings that just have big lobbies to impress you when you go into an office building? How are you going to make that into a shoe store, a drugstore, or a coffee shop? How are you going to handle the air conditioning when you not only have COVID spreading, but you have all these new diseases that are spreading from cattle, and you have bird flu, you have cattle flu, you have all of these things that are developing. You need to re-engineer all the buildings. A lot of developers saying, well, it's really cheaper to tear them all down and begin all over again. And there's a discussion that from England and the Financial Times to the United States, it may be easier for American listeners to understand it when it's in a foreign country than they can understand it here, because they don't like to hear bad news about America. So if we're talking about England, they're describing, what are we going to do with all of these office buildings that now are not occupied now that we're deindustrializing? If you want to see where American capitalism is leading, look at what Margaret Thatcher did to England. That's libertarian. That's the Republican policy. Let's have a low state. Let's get rid of the state. It's the road to serfdom, as Hayek said, and as Margaret Thatcher said. We won't have any government ability to regulate the economy. And the Supreme Court, as you know, a few months ago, said government agencies can no longer impose regulations on companies. That the regulations will have to be passed by Congress. Agencies have no power at all to regulate the economy with professionals. It has to be the politicians whose campaigns are paid for by the donors, who from the very class that the politicians used to be able to regulate, but now they can't appoint regulators to do it, and they follow the deregulators who pay for their political campaigns. So getting rid of permitting campaign finance of the donor class is another reason why the American empire is going under. If you have politicians who are following the rules set by the donor class, both the Republicans and the Democrats often have the same donors, certainly from the same industries. The automatic intelligence industry, the military-industrial complex especially, the oil industry, big agriculture. If you have these companies financing politics, then you're not going to have politicians backing prosperity for the 99%. They're going to back prosperity for the 1% of the monopolists or the financiers or the rent extractors that are their campaign contributors. And so you have the political system as part of this tunnel vision that, as Richard and I have just been saying, have led to this inability to understand the laws of motion of where the American economy is going, where finance capitalism is going, and where America's role in the world is relative where other countries have the option of going. And your only hope is that other countries are just as unrealistic. that they don't know what to do either, that they have been so used to the following the American plan that made it dominant a century ago that they don't realize that we're no longer a century ago. We're no longer in the post-World War I world, a completely different world, and it seems that the whole world is operating with a tunnel vision in the dark. That's what's so ironic about all this. We materialists think that people are going, and countries are going to act in their own self-interest, but neither the United States nor the other countries are acting in their self-interest. How on earth do you project what countries are going to do if they don't know what their self-interest is? That's what makes being a futurist so difficult. In the past, it was easy to be a futurist back in the 1970s. Alvin Toffler, Herman Kahn, and I, we used to talk together all the time. We'd all pretty much agree. Well, here are the interests of industry, here's the interest of oil, here's the interest of military. We could see what the interests were, and you just forecast. Here's what German interest is going to be, English. You can't do that anymore because nobody knows what their interests are, and they're all flailing. That's the problem that you have. How do you forecast what countries are going to do when their leaders don't know what they're doing and don't know what their advantage is? You can no longer think what's reasonable for them to do because they don't know what's reasonable, because they don't have a way of thinking about what's reasonable or what their interest is.